Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going deep, into self-sabotage. And wow, from these notes and excerpts, this is going to be quite the climb.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot here. Limiting beliefs, fear of the unknown, even that upper limit thing. This is going to be a journey.
It's like, base camp at Everest. But before we climb, what is self-sabotage, really? You highlighted Jung as a child fainting to get out of school.
It's fascinating, right? He's meeting a need to escape stress, but not confronting it directly. Classic self-sabotage, this coping mechanism, avoiding those deep, often unconscious needs and fears.
Okay, so like a quick fix, only temporary relief, right?
Mm.
You mentioned procrastination, that big project. Could that maybe be your fainting spell, avoiding putting your work out there?
Could be. And procrastination, just one sign of self-sabotage. But here's the thing. What's healthy for one person can be, bad for another. It's all about context.
So how do we know if we're falling into those traps?
Well, there's a pattern here. Prioritizing being liked over being happy. That constant need for a fresh start. Afraid of your own feelings. It might be taking the easy way out. Sacrificing well-being. Or those big dreams you noted down.
Yeah, but sometimes it's hard to see. Like we're too close, can't see the forest for the trees.
Exactly. And we're masters of denial. Needing to explain why things aren't going our way. It's avoiding taking responsibility for our role.
Oh, it's easier to blame anything else than to look inward. Face those truths. We've all been there.
We have, but until we acknowledge our own part, we're stuck. Real change, it starts with accountability. And that often, comes from a breaking point. Not just a bad day, but fed up with how things are.
Rock bottom, realizing things must change. Now, you mentioned your job, that frustration. Could that be it? That push you need to change?
Possible, yeah. That frustration, a catalyst for a major shift. But knowing and doing, those are two different things.
Right. So how do we harness that energy?
Yeah.
And turn it into action?
Confronting those repressed emotions, we need to make space. For anger, sadness, all of it.
Journaling. That helps me. It's like talking to myself on paper. You mentioned writing to your younger self. Have you tried that? It's offering compassion, understanding you might not have had back then.
It is. It is acknowledging those emotions, giving them a voice, and allowing ourselves to heal.
But it's not just about understanding. It's about action. But what if you feel overwhelmed? Even by small changes, where do you even begin?
Microshifts, that's the key. Real change, it rarely happens overnight. The material emphasizes that. Small, consistent actions over time. Sustainable change. Not a crash diet for our habits.
Love that. Microshifts. Little steps up our own Everest. They seem small, but they build up. It's about celebrating those victories.
Right. And that's where emotional intelligence comes in.
Okay. We hear that everywhere.
Yeah.
How does it actually help with this self-sabotage?
Understanding and managing our emotions effectively. Remember that presentation, the anxiety. Negativity bias, that tendency to focus on the negative. You might be fixated on what could go wrong instead of your past successes. Emotional intelligence, it helps us break free from that, see things more clearly.
So we train our minds to recognize those patterns, make choices that match our goals, even with those old fears and doubts.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. Self-sabotage, it often masks, deeper unmet needs.
Unmet needs. What do you mean?
Think of it like this, that recurring feeling you mentioned, not being good enough, no matter what you achieve. That could be a sign. A need for validation, recognition.
Wow, powerful. So it's not just the behavior like seeking approval. It's asking what need isn't being met.
Exactly. And that's where understanding core commitments comes in. These unconscious drivers, they influence our choices. Actions.
You highlighted passages about a core commitment to control. Could that be connected to your need for validation? Like feeling in control makes up for that insecurity.
That's a great connection. The material suggests our core need is often the opposite of our core commitment. The more you control everything, the less trust, acceptance from yourself, from others.
It's like we're creating this cycle. Our attempts to meet our needs actually push them away.
Precisely. And that's why awareness is so crucial. Once we understand these patterns, we can make choices to break the cycle, to find true fulfillment.
This is insightful, with peeling back layers of an onion, uncovering those deep beliefs, the motivations behind those behaviors.
You got it. Getting to the root, not just treating the symptoms. The more we understand, the more empowered we become to make real, lasting changes. Speaking of empowerment, you've got a lot here about trusting your gut. Powerful tool, right? Especially breaking free from those patterns.
I love that. But how do we know? Is it intuition? Or just, fear talking? You mentioned like worst case scenario thinking. Could that be clouding things?
Definitely worth considering. The material, It distinguishes. Intuitive thoughts, they bring peace. Invasive thoughts, they trigger panic. Intuitive, they open us up, feel expansive. Invasive, they close us down, make us feel trapped, anxious.
Makes sense. Like excitement versus dread. We've all felt both. Knowing the difference helps us choose better, right?
Absolutely. Reminds me of something else you highlighted, subconscious communication.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. Subconscious communication.
It's the idea that our behaviors, the self-sabotaging ones, they're messages from our subconscious trying to tell us something important.
So like it's speaking through actions, even if we don't realize the message. You mentioned attracting emotionally unavailable partners.
Sure.
Could that be it? Your subconscious communicating.
It's possible. That pattern could mean you need to look at, examine your beliefs about worthiness, intimacy. Maybe you're recreating dynamics from the past, or maybe you're scared of getting close, being hurt.
Wow. Deep stuff. It's like it tries to protect us, but then it backfires. It keeps us stuck.
Exactly. So important to listen to those messages, become aware of those patterns, and challenge the beliefs that are driving them.
Speaking of challenges, you highlighted embracing imperfection, even flagged a quote. The universe thrives on imperfection, just as nature does. But what if you're, like you, a recovering perfectionist? Hard to break free from those habits, right?
Can be tough. The key is shifting focus from outcome to the process. Instead of that unattainable ideal, we celebrate small wins. Acknowledge effort. Learn from mistakes. Micro shifts, remember, they apply here too.
So permission to be human, make mistakes, learn, and grow.
Exactly. Letting go of control, embracing, the messy, unpredictable beauty of life. True growth, it often happens outside that comfort zone.
Okay, feeling some discomfort right now, actually. But I'm going to embrace it, a sign I'm stretching, expanding.
That's the spirit. And speaking of discomfort, you highlighted trauma's impact on our lives, how it contributes to this.
You're right, that incident you mentioned from childhood sounds like it's affecting you now in ways you're just starting to understand.
Trauma, it leaves its mark, affects our nervous system. Emotional regulation, even trusting ourselves, others, often leads to those behaviors as we cope with those unresolved wounds.
Like we're stuck in survival mode, even when the danger's gone. So how do we heal from that? Reclaim that sense of safety, well-being.
The material, it stresses addressing those traumas, getting support, developing ways to cope to help us feel safer. Trauma-informed therapy, that can be incredibly helpful. And practices like mindfulness, somatic experiencing, they help regulate our nervous system, reprocess those memories.
You also highlighted creating safety in our lives. Practical steps. How do we do that?
Addressing those specific areas where safety was compromised. If it's trust from a past betrayal, you rebuild. With reliable, supportive people. Financial hardship, you create security. Healthy money habits.
Concrete steps, right? Addressing vulnerability. Creating stability, predictability. A safe haven, inside and out.
Exactly. And it's developing healthy coping mechanisms too. Journaling, writing to your younger self. Fantastic tools. Processing emotions. Cultivating self-compassion. The material also talks about expressing those emotions physically.
Oh, I love that. Shaking off that stuck energy. Let our bodies heal, rebalance. Dancing, running, even a nature walk. Movement. It's therapeutic.
Absolutely. And it's not just releasing the negative, it's cultivating the positive too. Those activities that bring us joy, spending time with loved ones, listening to music, creating, we fill ourselves with those positive vibes. Ripple effect, right? Enhances our well-being.
Rewiring our brains for happiness, resilience. And speaking of rewiring, you had a lot on those logical lapses that lead to anxiety. The worst-case scenario thinking, it keeps us stuck in fear.
Yeah, those logical lapses, they're sneaky. They operate under the radar, making us overestimate risks, underestimate our ability to cope. But we can train our minds to think more critically, challenge those distorted beliefs.
So like instead of catastrophizing about that presentation, letting fear paralyze you, ask yourself, what's the worst that could really happen? And even if it did, how would I handle it?
Exactly. Walk through those fears, break them down, recognize we have the resources, the resilience, and our thoughts, they're not always facts. We choose which ones to believe, which ones to let go.
We become editors of our own mental movies, focus on the empowering scenes, let go of the ones that keep us stuck.
Great analogy. Reminds me of another thing you had here, visualization.
Oh, visualizations.
Yeah.
Creating that mental movie, our ideal future, using it to inspire us now.
Exactly. You mentioned that career path, feeling drawn to it, but hesitant. Visualization, it could be powerful for you. Imagine yourself in that role. Thriving, confident, fulfilled. What's it feel like? What are you doing? Who's around you? The more vivid you make it, the more real it becomes. the more likely you'll take those steps to make it happen.
I'm getting excited just thinking about it. It's like planting seeds for our future, nurturing them with our thoughts, beliefs, actions.
Exactly. Not forcing, but aligning our energy with our desires, allowing them to unfold.
Surrendering to the flow, right?
Yeah.
Trusting the universe has our back. Everything's unfolding as it should.
Beautifully said. That surrender, it brings us to another important theme. Releasing the past. Rewriting our stories.
You mentioned that incident from childhood. Still haunts you. Sounds like you're carrying guilt, shame.
Holding on to hurts, it definitely hinders growth. Self-acceptance, like dragging an anchor, prevents us from moving freely. But there's a powerful technique, you highlighted it, superimposing a new narrative.
This new narrative, could it apply to that incident you described? The one that makes you feel inadequate?
Absolutely. Imagine yourself, now, healed, offering guidance, wisdom to your younger self. During that difficult time, imagine sitting with them, offering comfort, encouragement, perspective. What would you say? What kind of love, support would you offer?
Powerful image. It's like giving ourselves the compassion we didn't get back then. We did the best we could with what we had.
Exactly. Letting go of judgment, embracing ourselves with love, acceptance, not erasing the past, but shifting our view, integrating it into a larger story of growth, resilience.
You writing the story, not denying it.
Beautifully said. And by doing that, we free ourselves from the past's grip, create space for new possibilities.
This is powerful. It brings us to another theme you highlighted, living a truly enjoyable life.
You mentioned feeling stuck, going through the motions, not truly experiencing joy, that aliveness. The materialist says the purpose of life is enjoyment, but we struggle to be present to experience it.
So easy to get caught up in the what-ifs, the shoulds. We lose sight of the beauty, the wonder in each moment. So focused on achieving, striving, we forget to actually live.
A common trap. And instead of seeking happiness, which is fleeting, depends on things outside us, we should cultivate inner peace.
Inner peace. Tell me more. How do we cultivate that? Especially in, well, this chaotic world.
It starts by recognizing peace is an inside job. We don't find it out there, we cultivate it within. Some practical steps. Creating a supportive circle, minimizing negativity, drama, focusing on what's meaningful.
You're right. It's surrounding ourselves with what uplifts us, nourishes our souls, being mindful of what drains us. You mentioned isolating yourself when stressed or overwhelmed. Could that be, self-sabotage too?
Something to consider. Connection, it's essential. We're social beings. We thrive when we belong, feel supported.
Reaching out, connecting with those who love us, support us. Being vulnerable, authentic, remembering we're not alone.
Beautifully said. And that leads us to, another important concept you highlighted, the power of principles.
Yes. You mentioned feeling lost, no direction, like drifting without a purpose. Would establishing those guiding principles help?
Absolutely. Not chasing happiness, which is fleeting, but establishing principles. To guide our choices, create a foundation. For a fulfilling life, principles, they're our North Star. Help us navigate life's choices, challenges, with clarity, integrity.
Like internal guidelines. Help us stay true to ourselves, make choices that match our long-term goals.
Exactly. And there are specific examples. You mentioned struggling financially. Principles like living below your means, saving regularly, investing wisely. They could create stability, abundance.
Great ideas. And it's not just finances, right? Relationships, health, career, spirituality, anything important.
You got it. Creating a framework for living. Reflects our values, supports our well-being. True fulfillment comes from living in alignment with our authentic selves.
This is empowering, like taking back control, creating a roadmap for a future that's exciting and purposeful.
You captured it perfectly. And it's not about perfection. It's consistent progress. Celebrate our wins, learn from setbacks, trust the journey.
I'm feeling inspired, and I'm sensing we're nearing the summit of this deep dive. Any final insights? For those ready to conquer these habits, embrace a truly fulfilling life.
Well, it ends with this powerful idea, the path to mastery. Mastering ourselves, it means taking responsibility for our lives, how we respond to the challenges, the setbacks.
You mentioned, feeling like a victim, like things are just happening to you, not for you. Is that maybe not owning your power?
It could be. When we're victims, we give away our power, become passive. But We always have a choice. It's not what happens, it's how we respond.
I love that. Going from reactive to proactive, not letting our circumstances control us, but responding in a way that gives us power.
Exactly. And that's where embracing discomfort comes in. You talked about resisting change, even when you know it's good for you. Could that be avoiding discomfort?
You're right. It's so easy to want that comfort, security, but real growth. Often it's outside that zone. Discomfort's inevitable, but the material says suffering is optional.
Powerful distinction. Discomfort, it's a signal. We're stretching, expanding. Necessary part of growth. Suffering, though, that's usually a resistance to it, trying to avoid those tough emotions.
So we create our own suffering by clinging to what's familiar, even if it's not helping us anymore. How do we learn to embrace it? See discomfort as a good thing.
Realizing it's temporary, those feelings, they pass. And by leaning in, allowing ourselves to feel them, we build resilience, greater capacity for joy, fulfillment.
Like building emotional muscles. Stronger, more capable of handling, well, life's ups and downs.
Exactly. Not about becoming emotionless, invulnerable. It's learning to ride those waves with more grace, more ease.
The material ends with this beautiful message about our highest potential, connecting with our future selves, that vision, the highest versions of us, using it as a guide.
Remember that excitement you felt, that sense of possibility, purpose. That's your highest self calling out to you. Time to step into that vision, start creating that life.
Not waiting for permission or the perfect moment, just taking those steps now, those micro shifts, creating ripples, leading us towards our goals.
You got it. And remember, everything you need, it's already inside you to create a life that's truly yours, fulfilling. Trust yourself, embrace the journey, and never stop diving.
Wow. Incredible deep dive. We covered so much. From those root causes to the strategies for, living a more empowered life. Feeling inspired, ready to start making those changes. What about you? What resonated most? What's one step, even a small one, that you can take today to start moving towards that highest version of yourself? Every journey, it starts with a single step. Until next time, keep on diving.